Welcome back to the Super Data Science Podcast, everybody. Super excited to have you back here on the show. Today, we've got a very exciting episode. We've got two hosts and one guest. So our guest for today is Syafri Bahar, calling in from Indonesia, from Bali. And we've also got Jon Krohn as our co-host, calling in from New York. Hi, guys. How are you going?
Hi, Kirill. Doing good, thanks.
Hey, very well, Kirill. Yeah, delighted to be here.
Awesome. What's the time for you, Syafri?
Now it's 9 o'clock, actually, so I'm calling from Bali.
9 a.m., right?
9 a.m., yes.
Awesome. And Jon, you?
Yeah, 8 p.m. Getting there.
Crazy. Across all the time zones, right? And it's.
And how about you, Kirill?
For me, it's 6:30 a.m. About 6 a.m.
Oh, man.
6 a.m.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's very early.
Yeah, it's okay.
Do you always get up that early?
I do. My girlfriend doesn't. she was so like dazed. Had to go to another room to go and sleep there because this is the only room where I can record. Took her blanket, and pillow, and just went away.
Our apologies.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm glad we're all here. So we've, I think, met Jon. Our listeners have met Jon before from other podcasts. But just quickly, Jon, if you could give us a quick intro about your background.
Sure. I'm the chief data scientist at a machine learning startup in New York. That's kind of my day job. But on the side, I do lots of data science kind of education. So I have a book, Deep Learning Illustrated, that was a #1 bestseller. Not being translated into Indonesian yet, but we do have a lot of translations around the world. And I've also been doing some work with Super Data Science. So we've got a Machine Learning Foundations course that just launched in the Udemy platform together. And Kirill and I met through the Super Data Science podcast. So I was a guest on the podcast early in 2019. And I asked Kirill if he would like to be a guest on my podcast, which I had just launched. At that point, I'd only had 2 episodes. And we hit it off. We had a really great conversation. And if you don't mind me breaking it to your audience right now, Kirill.
Sure.
We then, a couple of months ago, Kirill approached me to begin hosting the Super Data Science podcast. So I'm absolutely blown away. I couldn't believe that he asked me to do that. And yeah, so now we're getting me warmed up by co-hosting today. And
Awesome.
I couldn't be more excited.
Me too. Super pumped. It's going to be an exciting time. I feel you're the right person to carry the SDS podcast forward. Thanks for being here today, Jon.
Yeah, an honor.
Awesome. All right. And by the way, congrats on the machine learning fundamentals or foundations. Like 90,000 students, right? Last I checked.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's 80,000, but that's about the same in terms of the impact. And yeah, 80,000 students. It's only been live for 5 or 6 weeks. So and that's the kind of thing that I couldn't have possibly ever dreamed of, that kind of thing. It's by association with you guys, with the Super Data Science podcast. And so thank you very much for that. And we're only just getting started. So there's 3.5 hours live for the course right now. And I expect when the podcast is released, it'll still be about that 3.5 hour mark. But by the end of 2020, it'll be about 6 hours. We'll have finished the first quarter or so of all the content.
Wow.
In 2021, there'll be 25 hours of content in there, covering linear algebra, calculus, probability, statistics, computer science, everything you need to know to be a great machine learning practitioner or data scientist.
Fantastic. That's really cool. And that's a very good segue to Syafri, because Syafri, you love mathematics, right? Your whole story is mathematics.
Sure,
right?
yeah, exactly. So, exactly.
Please tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I've actually been into mathematics since I was a child, actually. So my father is actually a math teacher. So when I was a child, so I remember a day where I was sitting on like elementary school and I started asking about these sequence problem, right? Like arithmetic sequence problem, but let's say the three differentiable layer of arithmetic sequence to my teacher. And then I actually asked the problems to my father, but he just tossed me a book. But later I found out that it's actually in a university book instead that I'm kind of being crunching in order to kind of find the solutions of the problem. And since then, I've actually grown my interest to math. In fact, I'm also lucky enough to represent Indonesia actually to a couple of math Olympiad competitions. So that's actually a very nice experience. Yes.
That's huge because Indonesia is the fourth most populous country on the planet. So you're representing a big population there.
That's huge,
it's quite a surreal also for me back then, because I was kind of like from the how do you call it, like the underdog regions of Indonesia, so to say. Like a lot of the representatives of Indonesia also always come from Jakarta, Java, right? And I was probably the first representative from that region, from that province, actually, after, let's say, 8 to 10 years. So it was quite a euphoria for me as well. Sorry?
What province?
Sulawesi province.
Sulawesi.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. There was a few active volcanoes. I was doing a data science, an analysis of the active volcanoes of the past, I don't know, centuries, and there's quite a few in Sulawesi. I think 4 or 5
exactly,
in the past hundreds of years.
Yeah, it looks like a letter K actually on the map, so it's easy recognizable. Right. Since then I've grown my interest, and I'm actually still actively like reading, learning about math book. I think I consider it as a hobby actually, because I find it just so beautiful as a discipline. So yeah, you're right about it. I'm a big fan of math.
That's awesome. And when you don't do math, what is it that you do? Because it sounds like you're so into mathematics. Sounds like your full-time job, but you have a different full-time job. Tell us a bit about that.
Oh yes, yes. Actually, like my day job, I am a VP of data science for Gojek. So Gojek is actually an on-demand super app platform. So we have around 20 products. I think we basically, like, from ride hailings, we have like food delivery, we have entertainment, kind of like a Netflix streaming services. We also have like insurance, for example. It's a super app. So it's basically. We used to actually have even a service where you can actually order a masseuse coming to your house within 15 minutes, actually, just like with a click of a thumb. But unfortunately, we sunset the service itself. But it is quite a hyper growth startup. So we become the first unicorn of Indonesia, and then 2-3 years after, we became the first decacorn of Indonesia, which is surreal in terms of growth.
What's a decacorn?
So a decacorn is like with a 10 billion valuation, basically.
10 billion valuation. Oh my gosh! Yeah. In 10 years, right? You said.
Well, 8 years actually, like to be precise.
Wow. Very cool. Are you subscribed to the Data Science Insider? Personally, I love the Data Science Insider. It is something that we created, so I'm biased, but I do get a lot of value out of it. Data Science Insider, if you don't know, is a free, absolutely free newsletter which we send out into your inbox every Friday. Very easy to subscribe to. Go to superdatascience.com/DSI. And what do we put together there? Well, our team goes through the most important updates of the past week or maybe several weeks and finds the news related to data science and artificial intelligence. You can get swamped with all the news, even if you filter it down to just AI and data science. And that's why our team does this work for you. Our team goes through all this news and finds the top 5, simply 5 articles that you will find interesting for your personal and professional growth. They are then summarized, put into one email, and at a click of a button, you can access them, look through the summaries. You don't even have to go and read the whole article. You can just read the summary and be up to speed with what's going on in the world. And if you're interested in what exactly is happening in detail, then you can click the link and read the original article itself. I do that almost every week myself. I go through the articles, and sometimes I find something interesting, I dig into it. So if you'd like to get the updates of the week in your inbox, subscribe to the Data Science Insider absolutely free at superdatascience.com/DSI. That's superdatascience.com/DSI. And now let's get back to this amazing episode.
And you're financed by some of the biggest possible financiers around: Sequoia Capital, Tencent, Google, Facebook. And so it's interesting that you would think that a lot of those companies would actually be competing companies. And so it's interesting, I guess they see a lot of potential in Indonesia. Something that really interests me and may interest a lot of our listeners is, what is a super app? So in the West, I don't think we have anything like that. It seems almost like in the West, they deliberately fragment apps. So Facebook fragmented into Messenger, and as many different pieces as possible. So when you have a super app, so when you look on your phone, it's just one app that you click on, and then when you're inside, you navigate to all these. You get your massage and your insurance once you're inside.
Exactly. No, exactly, John. Yeah, it is very interesting indeed, because to think about it, they're not really like a comparable, I would say, like a platform out there. But it's just the idea is we built like the whole ecosystem within one app, right? And I think as soon as we actually managed to create this network, and then you actually start to reap the benefits of having, because anything that you put in that ecosystem scale very fast, actually, right? So we became for example, like for the food delivery, like the biggest in Asia, excluding China. And then, for example, when we so we use like the logistics, for example, it also became the biggest in Indonesia, just from leveraging of this network effect actually that we have within the app. But you're right, even and then if you think about it, the opportunities to implement data science, machine learning is just immense in terms of personalization, right? It's just amazing. For example, being able to know the histories of food orders or massage appointments, right, allows us to kind of like recommend what is the best kind of services that you might think of using, actually, like a computer. So there's so many, and there's so many kind of like the network information within the network itself, which can actually be leveraged to build a very powerful personalization. So it's quite an exciting environment. It's like having 20 companies within one umbrella, pretty much.
Yeah, the data science perspective of it sounds absolutely amazing. And I guess we'll spend most of today's program talking about that. So it's great. I love this idea of how you can be like, oh, yeah, if you like a deep tissue massage, then you'll probably be interested in our athlete insurance.
Exactly.
That's awesome. It's like recommender systems on like a Netflix or Amazon, but on steroids, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like you get the network effect of the recommender systems. It's like exponential on exponential. No wonder
exactly
grows so fast. That's so cool. So you, as I understand, you are operating in Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, and Indonesia. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And how many people? Just so like people. So for those of course, for those people who are from those countries will know you well, but for those from the West who maybe haven't heard of Gojek, how many users do you have on your platform? How many people do you work with on your platform?
Sure. So maybe just to give the ideas of the scale, right? So the app itself has been downloaded by 170 million times actually, and I think 1 every 4 Indonesian has the app installed. They have actually by them. And then we have.
I have the app installed too.
I really.
I've had at least. Yeah. When I was in Bali, I asked for a ride. You get on the scooter behind this driver, and you hold on for your life. It's a really cool experience.
Yeah, and just to give you the scale, because that's very interesting, right? Because we have around total of drivers and then also service providers. We have around 2.5 million. So that's like almost 1% of the population of Indonesia. So it's quite crazy. So basically that's saying that a lot of people's lives actually depend on us, right? So it's also quite a privilege, I feel, because we need to do our job really well in order to be able to survive and really provide these people with the kind of like the day-to-day livings as well. So maybe a couple of other things. I think as well as in terms of the economy, also we've contributed immensely to Indonesia. So I think if we kind of like a total everything, so all the incomes coming from the platform itself, it actually contributes to 1% of Indonesians' GDP. So it's pretty big.
Amazing.
Incredible. Yeah.
And actually, we also hit our 2 billion orders milestones last year, if I'm not mistaken. So it's actually quite a milestone also for us.
Congrats, that's really cool. I'm sure data science played a huge role in that.
It is. Yeah.
So I had a question along a similar vein. I've been queued up for it perfectly, which is, so how big is the kind of the core company at Gojek? So for example, how many data science people are there?
Yeah, so data science, there are around 60 to 80 people, I think now. In total, within data science, we have around 150, 180 people in total. So now we actually have three different, I would call it like analytic professionals within the company. We have data scientists, we have BI, business intelligence. So we also have decision scientists. Recently, we introduced this basically to kind of like help us making the right decisions for the like $1 million decisions that we need to take. We need a really specialized knowledge to kind of like, how do you call it? To clear out all the ambiguities in terms of asking questions and being able to systematically and taking decisions in more rigorous way, basically. So yeah, that's about the size of the data team. Yeah.
Nice. The decision sciences team sounds like the holy grail in business. That's like what everybody wants to be doing. And maybe because you guys do it, that's why you're having this incredible hyper growth and you've become a decacorn. It could be a big part of it.
Yeah. We've actually just recently started, right? So we'll see, but I think we're probably one of the first that introduced the job family in Indonesia. So I am really looking forward to like what kind of impact actually it can. But if we look at already use cases, there's quite a lot of use cases already where we need to take, for example, decisions about expansion, decisions about releasing certain features, decisions about, for example, distributing vouchers, right? I think those are the typical questions that these job, I would say, architects will focus in answering. Yeah.
What's the difference in skill sets for a decision scientist versus a data scientist? Yeah.
So our definitions, because again, like within the market, especially in Indonesia, there are like different. Every company has their own ways to define data science. But I think our definition of data science versus decision science, like if you look at the core skill set, data scientists within our companies are very strong and in software engineering as well. So they're trained to build scalable machine learning systems. So a little bit more like applied machine learning engineers, actually, very, very close to that. While decision scientists, they need to be very strong with the statistical analysis. Like causal inference, for example, being able to do hypothesis testing, they need to be good with experimentation. So the focus are a little bit different. The data scientists, they really build data products, scalable data products, and our decision scientists really help with decision making, actually by running some certain analysis, statistical analysis that can help us making better decisions.
Wow, that's very cool. It's like, I guess in smaller companies, companies that are not as advanced in terms of data science, that is all combined in the analyst or the data scientist, that those like hypothesis testing and so on. But as you scale, you need, I guess you made the call to separate those two and really specialize people. All right, you are in hypothesis testing and you can run all these experiments, whereas you're in machine learning and engineering of features and things like that. So people can actually focus and get really good at what that, not one thing, but that's a group of things that are relevant to that profession.
Yeah, indeed.
That's very cool.
It seems like those data scientists, I've been reading about Gojek's machine learning platform. There are a series of articles on Medium, and so some very cool specialized tools like CartoBERT. So using the kind of BERT system, the transformers in natural language processing, so leveraging particular deep learning techniques to allow you in the ride-hailing product to be able to create names for pickup points, right?
Correct. Indeed.
And then I read about Turing, which is named after the great British computer scientist Alan Turing, and it's a tool for evaluating machine learning models. I guess before they go into production, or maybe after they're also in production, to make sure that they're still performing as you'd expect.
Yeah, Sure. Oh, I'm actually very, very happy that you've basically spent some time in visiting our like a Medium blog. And there are a lot of like a great articles over there. But you're right about Cartoburst. So I think the idea is like one of the things that we would like to. So this is also very interesting in terms of how we really bring data end to end. Just to particularly, if you don't mind, I'll tell a little bit stories about Cartoburst.
Please.
Right? So yeah. So it used to be that we learned from the data that apparently people who actually being picked up from like a very crowded locations, like a shopping mall center, etc. If we basically look at the percentage of people who call their drivers, it's actually 2x compared to the other place, right? So basically, what we have concluded that people are confused around these areas, right? So what we did then is that we run some clustering, we do visualizations basically, and we found out that among these pickup points, apparently we can actually find the center of those clusters where people actually being asked to being picked up. And then what we do is that we also have the chat history of drivers and then our customers, right? So what we did is that we, with a clustering system, we take the center point and we need to basically to attach a label into that. And that's where Cartoburst actually plays into a role because it allows us to crunch millions of chat logs and then summarize it into a pickup point, right? And it's just very, especially given the size of Indonesia, it's just not possible to do it manually. So what we did is that we run it for around, I think, 100,000 pickup points in Indonesia for the shopping mall. And then it translates into product features that people love. And then we also see quite a significant reduce in the number of calls between drivers and customers, right? So just to give illustrations how we kind of like really use data to improve the delight experience of our users. Yeah.
That's a cool one.
And in addition to that, actually, a couple of months ago, we released also together with Hong Kong University of Technology, we worked together and we released probably one of the bigger, like a BERT, one of the biggest BERT model, pre-trained NLP model for Indonesian language, actually. So, and we have open sourced it. So, if people here, if you are happen to interest, if you happen to be interested in Indonesian language, NLP for Indonesian language, you can actually go to www.indonlu.com. You actually can download the pre-trained model for Indonesian language. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great to be sharing your expertise with the world. Yeah, really wonderful. Seems like you guys are doing great things on your team. And so this is, maybe Kirill already knows this. I don't know how much you know about each other's backgrounds, but in your role, are you, who reports into you? How big are the teams? What is being a VP of data science mean at Gojek?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm also very curious. That's a great question.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, actually. So indeed, especially like being in the hyper growth startup, I probably changed my role for 3 to 4 times already within 2 years in terms of scope. So I originally hired to develop the data science capabilities within Jakarta originally, and then I became the head of functions for data science, basically. At that time, the team was still around 40, 50 people, I think, including the machine learning engineers. We call data science platform. And then recently, the portfolio has grown a little bit. So not only that, I actually have 2 other peers within Gojek. So we both report to the chief data officers of Gojek. So together with my peers, we basically split the portfolio. So I currently oversee around 9 verticals. So starting entertainment, third-party platform, groceries, marketing, for example. It's another one, logistics, right? So there are a couple of verticals, and we oversee both the analytic and science part of the portfolio, right? So what I refer to as analyst is the BI and like our analyst, a data analyst, and then the science part is decision scientist and data scientist. So probably there are like around 50, 70 people, 50 to 60 people, I think, eventually reporting to me currently. And then, so in terms of scope of work, it basically encompasses almost all spectrum. So if I were to divide the cluster a little bit, the activities, so starting from the people itself, we're taking care of the technology, what to invest. which AI technology that we need to, for example, invest next year. We also deal with building organizations. How do we organize ourselves actually to prepare us to tackle the company strategic team positions ourselves? So basically, all of these aspects, right, from hiring and everything, even the dirty one, like the financing, cleaning up the systems and stuff like that. So it encompasses almost everything, basically. So I actually do see myself as a problem solver in a way that wherever I try to fill the vacuum in terms of, hey, I don't think that there is for example, clear career path for some of our people, right? So I'm going to immediately jump, like talking to HR and ensuring that, for example, that we've managed to create a good system that allows people to basically follow their aspirations. But sometimes I'm also involved in a very project specific activities. Like, for example, really understanding our customers, creating a framework in order to be able to actively manage our customer portfolio, for example, by properly modeling CLV, right, customer lifetime, for example. I think those are different spectrums just to give some flavor of what I'm doing on day-to-day basis. I hope that answered your question, sir.
Yeah, that was an amazing answer, and it sounds like a really interesting role. Wow.
Do you still do much technical work?
Yes, I try to do so because I think, especially in this field, things just evolve very rapidly. So I try to try to spend a couple of hours still coding basically, and really pushing codes as well to the repository, being involved also in the technical discussion and the modeling. So I still try to do that. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll lose the touch. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very good to hear. I like what you said in one of your interviews about a high-performing data science team that requires 3 main components. Do you mind telling us a bit about that? As a VP of data science, you have a unique position that not only you need to deliver the work, but you also need to evaluate the performance of your team and report to higher up executives on, we are delivering value. This is a very useful team to the company. You have accountability and you have a responsibility to your team to do that. Otherwise, there's stories of whole teams getting disbanded because executives didn't see value. So, and I found your philosophy about what is a high-performing data science team very structured, and I think not only managers listening to this podcast will find it valuable, but also individual contributor data scientists will find it valuable to understand, to evaluate for themselves if they're part of such a team and what they can do in order to be part of such a team. If you could jump into that, would be great.
Sure. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. Indeed, I think what I found actually to be very challenging is really to establish values, right? Because especially data science itself as a discipline is a very new thing. So it takes a lot of faith, I would say, from executives to kind of even invest in the team, right? Because typically the investment will probably take, especially for our largest machine learning systems that we have that really move the needle, it probably took a year in the making. It involves a lot of iterations, trial and error, right? So I think what I also highlighted in my interview that basically what we need to show to the companies that we need, first of all, I think we need to measure everything. And that's also the reason why we actually integrate in all of our machine learning system. We integrate also the kind of a measurement system inside, just to ensure that we are actually able to quantify the impact, even on a team level. So I'm able to know, for example, what is the dollar impact that a team of 3 people basically deliver for a particular project, right? That's how rigorous we are in terms of measuring impact. And really, I think the case that we try to make is that we really want to make that we want to make a case that we're not a cost center, because there are a very tangible dollar savings or dollar generating actually that we do for the company. And we are able to achieve that by really putting a very strong measurement in place. Even before we engage in any of the machine learning projects, actually, I think the first thing that we ask to our product engineers counterpart will be, do you have measurement system in place? Do you have experimentation system in place, actually, just to understand whether basically the things that we will build for them will actually lead to many impact, right? And the fact about being in a hyper growth startup, there's just so many there's like hundreds of things that we can actually do for next year. So we need to have a very ruthless prioritization. And I think having a proper way to measure the impact or potential impact is very essential in order to establish a case for the company, right? So I think one of the characterizations of high performing team will be that they deliver impact. And how do they know whether they deliver an impact? Is that by really putting this measurement in place, and then by educating as well. I think what I came to learn as well during my experience within Gojek is that a lot of these end-to-end, a lot of these projects have actually managed to deliver a big impact. A lot of the challenges were, of course, there are technical challenges as well, but I think what not to be undermined as well is the challenge of the non-technical challenge of really ensuring that we have created a good structure for our data scientists and product engineers and engineering actually to work different pace, but they are able to kind of like integrate their solution. This is just one, right? And the second thing is also about constant education to stakeholders, right? To try to convince them why it is okay actually for their millions of dollars of their money actually being managed by a black box, right? I think that also requires a lot of convincing, I would say. So really like establishing a good operation model is very essential, I think, for the high performing team, because by having a good operational models, right? Just to give a little bit more flavor to that one. For example, we recently basically declared that all of our solutions need to be basically communicate with product engineering systems using API based, because that allows people basically to move in a different pace and then meet up again like a couple of weeks later to integrate their solutions. But as long as before the start of the project, the teams are very clear in terms of what they will deliver. And we only can achieve that by having a proper API contract, right? It allows team really to reiterate, right? And the things about data science, I think what I found to be very interesting is that their iterations, like their sprint cycles, are very different with product engineering sprint. Actually, there's so many data dependencies, right? When we look at from data science perspective, so we can't really treat it as an engineering sprint. So they need to be able to have the flexibility to move at different pace, but then eventually their solutions that they build need to match actually via this. And what I also find to be very important is to ensure that the team is empowered to make decisions, right? By having a proper experimentation system, having a robust methodology to decide whether team needs to go left or right, and empowering them to make decentralized decision making. Actually, I think that I found to be very important to ensure that the team can move very, very fast, right? So we need to trust them with decision making in decentralized manner, as long as the methodology and the system that they've actually created to make those decisions are robust, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And empower them to fail as well, right? That you said that in one of the other interviews.
Yes.
The decisions sometimes will be wrong, and that's they should know it's okay.
Exactly, and I'm actually very glad that we got an executive sponsor for this. I think or CEOs or co-CEOs recently are very supportive of that, right? With the cultures of it's okay of actually fail. Like it's better to fail fast and learn from it rather than like moving very slow. Because especially the competition is very fierce. The market also moves very fast. So agility is definitely something that we value very high within our company. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer.
It sounds like you guys are doing everything right. It's like, yeah, if I was in Indonesia and listening, I'd be like, man, how can I get involved with this company? Really amazing. You guys are, I mean, you're saying all of the things that I think are spot on from a quantitative data management perspective, how you are treating your data scientists and relating that into the broader operations of the organization and evaluating it. Brilliant.
Yeah. And actually I feel also very privileged actually to work with these amazing people. And I think I learned a lot from my team, and the ability just to work with amazing people who are actually distributed. So our team is actually well distributed. Even our CDO is actually working from US. So we have around 31 nationalities working for the company. So we really like chasing talent also like globally. So we have people across different continents actually working for us. So just
That's
as
awesome.
an additional information.
There you go. And so, how did you find yourself here? What was your journey? I mean, I know that you've worked across the world. You studied in the Netherlands, and then you worked there for a while at banks, asset management company. And so, what was your journey from that world? So, from a different continent, I expected when I was talking to you that that you would have been involved in a lot of the finance applications at Gojek. I thought that that would be what you were working on, but it sounds like it's much broader than that. So how did you end up making that journey from financial companies, really traditional financial companies, big banks in the Netherlands, to a hyper growth decacorn in Indonesia?
Yeah, thanks a lot actually for asking the questions. I think because especially the journey has been very intimate to me, and I think the reason of that because I've always doubt whether like a pure mathematician like me is actually able to make an impact for the society, right? I always see that as a very remote. So I remember there was some certain time in my life that I say like, hey, I'll like because I was actually my background is actually in pure mathematics. So my thesis back then is about topological structure. Basically, so I haven't really seen data in my. So I worked a lot with like writing formulas, drafting formulas, when I was at my bachelor education. So it just felt very remotely, right? And not until I came to the Netherlands and I actually switched a little bit to the applied mathematics. So I specialized in. So I was actually taking education to be a quant, and that there I got myself into a lot of like high performance computing, a little bit like stochastic courses, and then be able to actually see data. So it's quite a how do you say it's quite a journey actually to how do you call it to come from pure mathematicians
Yeah.
to applied exactly right.
You might not even have had numbers for many years.
No,
It was just variables, right? That's
it's just
so
variables,
interesting.
indeed. Yeah, exactly. And then when I came to bank and I started actually my education, and I was trained, I would say, in a very classical environment, right? I remember one of my mentor back then, I was requested to do analysis with only 5 basic statistics: mean, median, percentile, max, and mean, right? And I really need to kind of like, yeah, exactly. Just how to go, like really rely a lot on my problem solving skills to really like and getting to know what these measurements are actually doing. Because actually, I was surprised that a lot of things can be done with this very basic statistics. Actually, a lot of insight can be uncovered by just playing around with the weighted average, for example, and then being able to compare these different statistics and really make an educated guess in terms of what is the shape of the distribution, whether is there an anomaly or not. So actually, with some basics, as long as one knows very well the ins and outs, actually there are a lot of things can be done. So I was actually trained in that environment. And I was also lucky enough to work with different type of risk. And I think for the audience who's not very familiar with risk management, so they're actually like a different type of risk. And what's very unique, because for each of different types of risk, it actually deploys different type of mathematical tools. Just an example for credit risk, right? I use a lot of predictive models with counterparty credit risk. For example, my last type of domain that I've worked with before I moved to Indonesia, I actually needed to do a lot of simulations kind of thing to actually maintain Monte Carlo engine for the bank itself. So basically, what we need to do, like we have a couple of hundreds of thousands of trades, and we need to do simulations of thousands of risk factors. And not only we need to simulate it for 1 day or 2 days later, but really like 30 years ahead. So I basically I use a lot of the like a parametric simulations technique in order to be able to do that, right? But basically, what I wanted to say is that I really built the kind of like the required skill set in a very classical environment, really like bits by bits. And then what I found to be very beautiful about mathematics is because it's very how do you call it? It's transferable. to other type of domains because the language are the same, especially like the language of linear algebra. I think it's very useful in order for me to grasp the new concept as well. So when I came back to Indonesia, I started at a fintech company, and then by coincidence, I gave a talk at Gojek actually, and then I got approached by what now becomes the co-CEOs of Gojek itself, and I got hired from a coffee actually.
Nice.
And I'm actually very glad that he took a bet on me until I basically I managed to be at where I am now.
That's
So it was
interesting.
quite a series of coincidences actually.
That's very interesting. I've got a question, kind of like I guess a question that will challenge me more, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. So, the way I teach data science in the courses is very different to the way Jon teaches, and the way I guess that you apply data science is. I studied also mathematics, studied mathematics and physics in my bachelor, but it was a long time ago, and I liked it a lot. But the way I applied data science when I was at Deloitte and in the industry required very little mathematics, and that's how I teach it as well. Like I teach it more of as a kind of like plug and play type of instrument. That all right, so machine learning. Here's an algorithm. I don't know, naive Bayes clustering. This is intuitively how it works. This is what's in the background. Like this is what's going on, and this is how you apply it. And I avoid teaching the mathematics. And so, for instance, the analogy I give is driving a car. To drive a car, you need to know where to put the petrol, how to steer, where to press the gas, where to press the brakes, and you need a lot of practice. You know, that's how you pass your driving test. You never need to know like what a crankshaft is, how it's different to a camshaft, what's under the hood. Like I don't even sometimes know how to put the oil in the car for for crying out loud. So my question to you is like, is there a right or wrong, or why do you find like if you think it's important for people to learn mathematics in order to be data scientists, then why?
Understand. Okay. I think it all very, very depends on the type of domain that they will work on in the future and what they're interested in. I would say, because if we kind of like look at the spectrum of the applications of mathematics in data science, I think we can divide it in a couple of clusters actually, right? And particularly for Gojek, why it is important for the people to understand the basics, because we dealt a lot with what I call greenfield projects. So these are the type of projects which we can't just Google and like get the answer. We really need to exercise the first principles in order to understand what kind of mathematical apparatus that we basically need to deploy to solve the problem, right? So like a business can just come to us and say, hey, we have this amount of budget. I want you to be able to distribute it in an optimal way. So very, very fake and ambiguous, right? And so one really requires to ask more and ask the right questions. First of all, to understand the real problem. How do you define optimal? What are the different levers that we basically can use to distribute those things? And how can we basically use the right apparatus to model the problem itself? So what I wanted to say basically that's also the reason why we emphasize this a lot, the concept. So even for example, if we take linear regressions during an interview, I think what we sometimes do, we try to tweak it a little bit, the problems. And what if we take this L1 penalty? What if we take L2 penalty? What if, for example, we shift the distributions of the target variable to become very highly imbalanced? Just to kind of like test the ability of the candidates to adapt to different reality that they might encounter while working on the problems within Gojek. And the reason why we do it because we think this is a relevant skill set to have, right? But I can imagine, for example, when one will focus a lot on building the kind of like the data science platform or engineering platform, it might be less relevant to know the kind of like 2-3 layers deeper. Like what you said, right? So more like a plug and play, but I think the emphasis will be how to design the right architecture that can be very scalable, right? And how do we use the mathematical concept to cut some of the computational resources that we basically goes into that. And maybe in that case, it will be less obligatory to know the 2-3 layers depth. So maybe I'm apologize maybe because there is no like a straight answer, but I think it all depends. right? And I think for the Gojek context, it's very important to understand those basics, because then there are like the choice of apparatus to deal with the problem is just quite immense. We employ the econometric technique. We employ also the operation research techniques, for example, in our problems. If we play around with logistics, sometimes also predictive models, supervised and unsupervised, and even to some certain extent also some bandit type of algorithm. There's just quite a lot of possibilities over there. So it's really important to know the at least 2-3 layers deep from the mathematical perspective, right? But I think from my personal opinion, I think it is also very important to basically how do you call it, like a painter, right? Sometimes we need to be able to really bring people to the how do you call it, to appreciate the paintings itself. And I think sometimes the best way to do it is that by not starting with like a 2 times differentiable calculus, but really starting with the stories, and then like, hey, why this is important, why vector space is important, because hey, we can actually translate the abstraction of this problem by bringing it to the vector space, for example. Then they are able to imagine like the solutions of the problem, right? So I think it depends, and I think my personal preference is always to start very simple and then try to peel the layers one by one, like bringing them to the bit more how do you call it, like a depth, the required depth actually necessary. So yeah, that's just a little bit my philosophy in learning as well. So it seems to be aligned with your the way you present your teaching.
I love that answer, and I don't I don't think I have too much extra to add. I think that is kind of summarize the value of understanding the underlying mathematics is that I love the car driving analogy, but the beautiful thing about machine learning is it isn't necessarily actually that complicated what's going on under the hood. And so I started teaching exactly the same kind of way that you described teaching, Kirill. And it's only relatively recently that I was like, maybe it is worth getting into the partial derivative calculus, the linear algebra that's happening under here. And I was inspired to think that by colleagues of mine, people who work for me. I would see them doing matrix algebra, or I would see them thinking about what's the right data structure for this particular type of data in this model because of how we're going to be scaling it so that we can minimize computational resources. So I was seeing people use these underlying understandings to make, on the science side, huge intuitive breakthroughs that by only understanding the scikit-learn API, there's no way you could have had that breakthrough. And then on the engineering side, being able to think about, okay, what is the time complexity or the memory complexity of what I'm doing here? And then how can I maybe make adjustments there, trade-offs between computational complexity versus memory complexity, so that I can use fewer resources or maybe have a faster experience, real-time experience for my users. So yeah, it's a really recent thing for me that it seems so valuable. But the more and more I dig into it, the more and more I appreciate that, wow, there's so many possibilities. And there's still absolutely a time and a place for using the high-level APIs. I mean, maybe more often than not. But to be making really cutting edge algorithms, or to even be like understanding and trying to deploy some of the latest things that you read that might only occur in papers or graduate level textbooks, there might not be a high level API for you to use yet. So if you wanted to make Cartobert, you can't just be able to use BERT. You have to understand what's happening in BERT.
Fascinating. Yeah, if I can add a couple of more sentences to that, right? I think I'm like personally think that I'm on personal missions to really like spark interest from people, really, especially in Indonesia, right? To really found this discipline to be fascinating. I really want like a people in Indonesia, like if they're child, for example, are being asked, what do you want to do in the future? Instead of saying astronaut or doctor, for example, they say, hey, I want to be data scientist. And I think what I wanted to kind of like emphasize over there, I think there's just so many beautiful things which we can actually put in more intuitions in order to just make the first bridge for people to cross that bridge, to find it interesting. And I found the communications via via wrapping up things in terms of intuitions, right? Like what Kirill just mentioned, I think is very helpful to spark the interest and really for people to get interested and really to get motivated, and they will gain energy in order to go even deeper to deeper level. But I think I'm still learning. Kind of like I try to kind of like also learn like how can I actually present all these different complex concepts actually and make it very simple, intuitive, and exciting as well. I think that's kind of my personal mission, which I'm still learning, of course. But yeah, I think it's just so beautiful in terms of discipline, and I think a lot more people actually can benefit from that, and especially the society.
Thanks, guys. I asked to get challenged, and I feel challenged. So yeah, it's a good. I think it's a good perspective that there's room for both to get started. Go down the intuition path, but then always keep in mind that you can go deeper, and it will give you more like superpowers with the mathematics. Syafri, you mentioned that Gojek is hiring, right? So where can people apply? And then I wanted to ask you a second question: what does it take to thrive as a data scientist at Gojek?
Sure. Thanks a lot for asking this question specifically. It helps us a lot, right? And I think I think people can always find the open positions actually within the recruitment. And I think if people just type like a Gojek recruitment, they'll pop up basically the website where they can see what are the available positions at Gojek. And I think the second question is very, very interesting. I think the fact that the company itself is, how do you call it? We're going to the next phase now. So it used to be that we are in this very high growth phase, so to say, where things are a little bit ambiguous, I would say sometimes. So people who can navigate within an ambiguous environment will thrive within Gojek, right? People who can actually systematically approach problems in general, they will thrive. And I think it also takes a lot of determination and grit to push things as well. As a data scientist, and I think this is also the type of data scientists who actually do not just stick with conventional approach of things, but people are required, or data scientists are required also to be able to exercise first principle. And I think those are the type of data scientists who can actually thrive within Gojek environment. So they need to be able to very diverse enough to know what are the different apparatus available over there to solve problems, and be very skillful enough to, and I think also be intellectually humble to really acknowledge that we don't know what we don't know. Because sometimes it's just really like asking, sometimes actually there are a lot of things that we can't, that actually hidden behind all of those numbers and digits that we see on our screen as a data scientist, right? So I think I often also ask my data scientists just to go to the field, really talk with our drivers, really understanding their pain points, and then that way it actually allows them to understand and to basically rationalize what they've seen under their on their PCs in terms of like all the figures and numbers, right? And then from those intellectual curiosity, they are able to frame the problems correctly, and then frame it in as data scientist problem. And then for again, the next level will be to find the right apparatus. And I think another quality that I think also will help a lot will be to be very practical. So if you look at the overall in the company, there's a lot of problems that requires like a simple solutions, because there are a lot of like low-hanging fruits within the company. So these are the type of problems that we need basically the first 80% we can achieve with a standard solution, right? But there are also rather mature problems where in order to go from 95% to 97%, then we will need the fundamental research. And I think what I always told to my team is that we should be fine using hammer to kind of like hammer the problem, but we should not shy away from using scalp as well. in really like formalizing the solution. So I think this type of mindset will basically help people to thrive within the Gojek environment. Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think something that if people get a chance to check out the video version of this podcast, you can see Syafri is so happy this whole time talking about modeling, and maybe that even comes through in the sound of his voice, but there's so many points where he like throws his head back with a big smile because you're just, it's like, you're so enlivened by these questions and these ideas. It's wonderful to see.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jon and Kirill.
Yeah. In one of the videos you mentioned in one of your interviews that when you were working as a quant back in Europe, I believe, you realized that the impact you make cannot extend much further beyond the company you work for, and that you just want to do more. You want to do work, or your quote, quotation marks, I just want to do more. I want to do work to benefit a lot of other people. Do you feel that you're doing that at Gojek now?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do, and I'm actually feel lucky myself because when I wake up in the morning, I still feel that this is that day is my first day. To be honest, because I'm really still very motivated to solve people problems. Right? And the things about Indonesia, because there are just so many structural inefficiencies within the countries that I believe people like me and other. I think there was also like an interview where I specifically called all the expats over there, like Indonesian people who live abroad, to just come and then really contribute to the countries, because there are just so many structural issues that we need to fix, right? And I think exploitations of natural resources is one way to again extract values, but I think solving structural inefficiency is also like one way to create values to the system actually. And I feel actually blessed and I'm privileged also to have the opportunities to really able to serve the community, because and these are the products that I can really relate on. Like my family will say, "Hey, I feel that this app actually has helped me to remove the daily frictions." Right? Even for example, if there is something bad happening, I will get the immediate feedback. And even because I also sometimes take GoRide to before pandemic, of course, I take GoRide to office. Right? I talk to the drivers as well, and then he mentioned how his life actually has changed since he became one of our partner, right? He was able to, for example, adopt a couple of children because of the fact that he worked as a partner, like a driver partner within our platform. I think those are all the stories that really keeps me going through the day, and I feel blessed, to be honest, to be able to have the opportunities to do that. Yeah, especially with my remote discipline, what's considered to be very remote, right? Mathematics, computer science, and social impact. Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you. That's very inspiring to hear. That's I wish for as many people listening as possible to feel the same way at work. It's clearly a very fulfilling place to be in.
Thanks.
That's awesome. Jon, do you have any questions to finish off?
No, we've covered all of my questions, and I love the ones that you asked as well, Kirill. I've learned so much today. I can't help but notice that it seems like Gojek's mission is to impact at scale through technology. And so it sounds like you're really living that as a data scientist at the firm, Syafri. And I don't have any other questions. I just felt like saying that one more time, kind of reinforcing this idea of how with, probably the vast majority of people listening to this podcast are data professionals or aspiring data professionals. And to hear a story like this today, it made me feel inspired. And so I hope you feel inspired too, to be identifying places that you can be making a big positive socioeconomic impact with your skills. Even if you started with a pure math topology background, you too can make a difference.
There's a nice bit you put over there, John. Yeah, and thanks a lot. And I think I really enjoyed the conversations. Actually, like both of you have done a fantastic job in like really controlling the flows and just really participating as well, like genuinely ask questions. I think, and I think to a lot of like data professionals out there, and I think I still fundamentally believe in the futures of our professions. Actually, I think we can do a lot of things for the community, even for the world in general. I think we just scratch the surface of what data actually can do and bring to life of of millions of fellow people out there. So yeah, I would really encourage people who are in their learning journey to keep going, find their energies and their motivations to keep going, because it's a beautiful thing and it's worth to really put investment in really enhance the professionals and also like the knowledge in this field. So thanks a lot. And I think both of you also have inspired people with the podcast, and also like especially for the aspired data scientists and data professionals out there. So thanks a lot for that, contributing back to the community. Yeah.
Thank you, Syafri. It's been a really cool podcast. And for those of our listeners who want to or would like to connect with you, or maybe just follow how your career progresses, where are some of the best places to get in touch?
Yeah, I think best to get in touch via my LinkedIn. Actually, I don't have a social media like Instagram or Twitter intentionally, but I think the best place to connect with me will be via my LinkedIn. Actually,
Thank you.
And actually, I do plan also. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah,
I think. No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't realize who Kirill was speaking to. Syafri, you go ahead.
Thank you. No, so I was actually thinking also of sharing more materials and sharing some of more thoughts as well. Actually, so I felt that I could have done it a bit better because especially for a lot of like aspiring data professionals in Indonesia. So I think those are the things that I personally committed at least to 2021. So hopefully more content, right, that I can share to the community as well in the future. Yeah.
Nice. Jon?
Oh, I was just going to say that on the LinkedIn point, that I don't think, Syafri, you shouldn't feel ashamed that LinkedIn is your go-to social medium, because I think Kirill and I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It makes me feel better at least that I'm not
Yeah. I like that's the kind of like the only one I really use. I don't think I use any other one.
Same.
Syafri, one final question for you. What's a book that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, so in terms of books, there's actually quite a lot that I have in mind, but maybe just to select few of them, definitely like elements of statistical learning is a good start, right? I recently also get myself more into causal learning, basically because it happens to be that we're in the phase where we will need it a lot, actually. So
Judea-Pearl?
A book, yes.
Yeah.
That is for the math fanatics. There's also like the title is What If. I forgot the author again, but What If is also like a good mix of combinations of theory and practice as well. And Judea-Pearl is definitely, if you're into math and stuff, I think you will find you'll enjoy reading the Judea-Pearl's book on that. And I also like.
What is it called?
The
book.
The book of also
Judea-Pearl.
Causality.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. An element of statistical learning is also a good book, as I mentioned earlier, right? And there's also this 100-page machine learning book that I just like from one to time like to read as well as a refresher, because it's condensed everything within one book. Nice. Do you happen to recall again the name of the author, John? The 100.
It's Andre. It's so embarrassing. I can't remember. Yeah, that's right. Andre Berkoff. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Andrew Berkoff. Oh, John, you might have him on the podcast sometime. We've been talking with him.
Well, he's been making quite a splash. I would love to have him on the podcast.
He's from Canada, right?
He is. I think he's in Montreal.
Russian, ex-Russian, but in Canada.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, Syafri, thank you so much. Jon, thank you a ton. It's been a huge pleasure having being part of this podcast. It's been great.
Same.
Sure. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, Kirill. Thanks, Jon.
So there you have it, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this episode and enjoyed the conversation we had with Syafri and Jon. I definitely had some great laughs. My favorite part of this episode, there's lots of really cool insights that were shared. My favorite part was the use case that Syafri shared around Car2Bird and how they modified Bird and how they used it to analyze all those interactions between customers and drivers to figure out the best, how to optimize their logistics for pickups, and also how in result that helped reduce the number of calls and the number of basically improve efficiency. Also, I really enjoyed hearing about what Syafri mentioned at the end about meaning and purpose, that he is very excited to be helping people, to be contributing to improving people's lives. In that example that he shared of a driver that was able to adopt children, I think that's very noble, and I wish for all data science to ultimately result in great things for communities and people across the world. That would be very good, and if we all look out for that and try and strive to find jobs and make our jobs about impact, I think that will help serve the world and also create more happiness around the world. So, as usual, you can find the show notes at superdatascience.com/427. That's superdatascience.com/427. There you'll find any materials that were mentioned on the show, all of the books that Syafri mentioned and Jon mentioned as well, plus the URL to Syafri's LinkedIn. We'll also include the URL to where you can apply for a job at Gojek as a data scientist if you would like to explore that further. Make sure to connect with Syafri, make sure to connect with Jon. They're both open to connecting on LinkedIn. And yeah, you'll hear more from Jon in the coming weeks. As mentioned at the beginning, there'll be this transition. I'll talk more about that in the coming episodes. And yeah, on that note, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with somebody. It's very easy to share. Send them a link, superdatascience.com/427. And I look forward to seeing you back here next time. Until then, happy analyzing.